So good morning and how are you doing today? With around 115 days left for the CAT exam, this video is going to be about a very important topic, which is VARC attempt strategy. In a lot of my previous videos, I've mentioned how mocks is the most important thing for clearing the CAT exam. But what you need alongside mocks is a proper attempt strategy. CAT is a very time constrained and a competitive exam, and it's not going to reward you for doing the difficult questions in the exam. Rather, you need to optimize how you're going to spend the 40 minutes and extract the maximum marks out of each section. For this to happen, a proper attempt strategy becomes crucial. And I promise you here, this is going to be one of the best videos out there for a VARC attempt strategy. So grab your notebooks and pens if needed, because this is going to be a little longer video than my usual videos and it's going to be extremely detailed. Just a funny story before we begin. Initially, I decided to create a single video having the attempt strategy for each of the three sections, but the information I noted for the VARC section itself became so lengthy that I decided to make a separate video for this. If you don't know me, my name is Aditya and I'm a second year student at IIM Bangalore. I cleared CAT in my second attempt, and where I went from a 92 percentile in CAT 23 to a 99.6 percentile in CAT 24. So all of what I would be saying in this video comes from my personal experience of giving the CAT for 2 consecutive years. So let's get started with it. So to begin with, what are we trying to achieve here? Firstly, this video is aligned to people who are looking or targeting upwards of 99 percentile in CAT. Ideally, everyone who's giving the CAT exam should target a percentile over 99, whether you're targeting the top IIMs or not. Come on guys, we need to set high goals in the first place. At times, even getting a 99.2 or a 99.3 percentile becomes insufficient for getting calls from these top colleges, but let's not get into the dreary part of this. So now there are basically two paths through which a person scores upwards of 99 percentile or even higher marks, right? The first category is people who do exceptionally well in one of the sections. I have friends here in IIM Bangalore who've scored like over 50 marks in the DILR section, over 50 marks in the quant section. What this does is it carries your entire score. This gives you the leeway to score lower marks in one of the section or score moderately in the remaining two sections. However, this is not the case with most people. I'm not a believer of scoring exceptionally high in one subject unless you're naturally gifted in it. At least during the preparation phase, you should be targeting each of the three sections, completing the syllabus and being good at everything and being ready for everything that comes your way. That is how you go about preparing. You do not completely rely on one section, hoping that it just carries your boat. Now, before deviating any further, let me define success in the VARC section for you in two ways. That would be a short-term goal and a long-term goal. So the short-term goal is increasing your reading speed while maintaining your accuracy, so you're able to reach a level where you're able to do 3 RCs and the entire VA section in any mock that you give. I know this might sound overwhelming to a lot of people out there who are currently stuck with being able to do around 2 RCs and some part of the VA section, but trust me guys, I have done it. It is very, very possible. And only when you try and increase your speed, you'll be able to do so. Now, coming to the long term goal would be further increasing your reading speed, maintaining your accuracy, and decreasing the amount of time you spend wasting while going back and forth in the passage and the question and answers, so that you're able to complete all 4 RCs along with the VA section. I know this might come as a shocker because all of the coaching institutes, and in fact, a lot of people out there pitch for things like doing just 3 RCs or doing just 2 RCs in the entire VA section. So let's take this with an example. What people outside are telling you is if you need to score 30 marks, you need to do 10 questions very correctly, very accurately, scoring 3 marks in each, which will get you your 30 marks. But this is not how the paper actually works. You will definitely, or almost in a lot of cases, end up doing one or the other question wrong. So you need to have such speed where you're doing at least 15 questions in which you have the leverage to do 3 questions wrong, so that if you get 12 questions right, you get a 36 score minus 3, which takes you to 33. In this case too, your boat has sailed above the 30 marks marker, but you've still done 3 questions wrong, right? But I would not deny with the fact that doing the entire VARC paper is almost always possible. This is not true. Only if you build this mindset to target the entire paper, you'll be able to do so in some of the mocks, right? Let's say 30 to 40% of the mocks. But trust me, in the final D-Day, when the pressure is high and the clock is ticking, you'll definitely be able to pull through. So going forward in the video, I'll explain you the different strategies as to how you can actually get this done, how you're going to improve your speed, where you're going to save time and things like that. So just hang on with me going forward. Now let me try and explain how this is actually possible. I'll try and explain this through the biggest mistake that I realized people make and even I used to make. And that is going back and forth between the question and your RC passage. So what I'm trying to say here is you need to have or you need to improve your reading skills in such a way that one reading of the entire passage should be sufficient for you to solve the questions of the RC. When you're reading the questions, the maximum that you should be doing is just going back and referring to something. You should not be going back and reading the passage again. That is a complete waste of time. There's a way to go about this. Let's say you're stuck at a question where you're not able to eliminate the three options, right? Do not try and read the passage again to solve that question. A way to move forward from that question is trying and consoling yourself by saying that an easier question is waiting for you ahead. And just tell yourself that you would come back to that question if time permits later on in the exam. Trust me, you would be grateful that you moved on from that question and attempted some other easier question ahead. And let's say you're able to come back to it. Great, you've done the paper on time. And even if you don't come back to it, you've done the other easier questions ahead and skipped this question for which you would have wasted time and you're not even sure whether you would be able to solve it. So this was all about the mindset shift that I wanted you to have before going any further into the video. Trust me, doing the entire paper is very much possible, and people who are like topping and scoring upwards of 99.5 percentile, what do you think they're doing? They're doing the entire paper. People who are scoring upwards of 120 and 130 marks, they're solving the entire paper. So you need to like just be aware that it's possible. Now let's jump right into the VARC section, and I'll just tell you my personal strategy as to how I looked into this section. So for me, RC was the major component or my primary focus in the VARC section, and VA was something I looked at from a point of view as a bonus section. Let me try and explain. So RCs are basically the ones people usually start with. Of course, this can be subjective, but RCs are longer passages, require a lot more focus, have four questions that could be solved if you understand the passage clearly. On the other hand, the VA section has some of the questions which do not have any negative marks. So even if you're very, very low on time, you could attempt them or even just tukka maar ke aa sakte ho usme. That is how it goes. And personally, I found some of the sections of the VA part very difficult. Like I found para summary very challenging because it's already a summarized passage of 2-3 lines, and then there are 4 crisp sentences written, and you need to see which sentence uh, encompasses the entire meaning of the above passage. So personally, I found it challenging. This is a personal experience, but VA was something I looked at completely from a bonus point of view. I tried and maximized my marks in the RC section and attempted whatever I could in the VA section. Now coming to the part that you would be interested in is the exact strategy, the time breakdown for each RC so that you're able to attempt the entire paper. So to give you a very ideal timeline for it, you need to target every RC by giving it 7 minutes. So hear me out, 7 minutes for 4 RCs is 28 minutes, and then you have 12 minutes for the VA section. So this is the ideal timeline you should follow, and whenever you're practicing your RCs, try and increase your speed while maintaining accuracy to be able to do an RC within 7 minutes. So this can be done by reading the passage in approx 3.5 to 4 minutes and then spending the remaining 2.5 to 3 minutes in solving the 4 questions. That is how you go about it. So personally, I felt that anything around the 10 to 12 minutes marker was sufficient for the VA section. At times when my time fell slightly below the 10 minutes, I had to rush through the section, or maybe I would have missed one of the VA questions, but 10 minutes is a sweet spot to go about it. Now 7 minutes might sound very overwhelming to a lot of people because yes, it's difficult to read the entire passage in 3.5 to 4 minutes, make sense of the entire thing. Also, I'm asking you not to go back to the passage again and again, so it becomes a little challenging. So let me go forward with 2 real life scenarios that I personally experienced and what I would have done in those cases out there. So starting with scenario 1, let's say instead of the expected 7 minutes, you spend a little more time in the first 3 RCs that you did, and you end up with 25 minutes spent in the 3 RCs. Now you have 15 minutes on the clock and you have the entire VA section left and you have 1 RC left. What I did in these cases was I would speed run the 4th RC in 5 minutes. I know 5 minutes is not possible, but I would anyhow do it because I have this thing in mind that 10 minutes is sufficient for the VA section. I would just speed run the fourth RC, see which questions I can attempt with surety, even if it's one or two question out of the four questions that you get in an RC. And then I would spend the entire 10 minutes on my VA section. Let me tell you the downside if you don't do this. Suppose you have 15 minutes on the clock with one RC and the entire VA section remaining, and you decide to go forward with the VA section. And suppose you end up spending, let's say, around 11 to 12 minutes in the VA section. Now you have 3 minutes on the clock and an entire RC remaining. Trust me, this is time that is wasted. 3 minutes would just tick by and you would not be sure what to do. You would try and read the passage, not understand things, and there would be a situation of panic because 3 minutes is almost nothing to do an RC, right? Another scenario I want to present, which happened with me a lot of times, because as I mentioned earlier, completing the entire VARC section is really challenging, and even the best people are not able to do it at times when the RCs are challenging. So another scenario that goes by is, let's say instead of the usual 7 minutes, you end up spending 9 minutes per RC in your first 3 RCs. This gets your time to 27 minutes, and now you have just 13 minutes left on the clock with 1 RC remaining and the entire VA section remaining. What I did in these cases is I would not speed run the 4th RC in 3 minutes. That is like madness. That is not possible. You would not understand anything that you're reading unless, of course, you're an expert reader. But what I would do in this case is I would give time comfortably to my VA section, the entirety of the 12 to 13 minutes, and try and do it very properly. Now, what happened in most cases was, because I trained myself to complete the VARC section in 10 to 12 minutes, I would be able to solve the VA section in about 10 to 11 minutes. Now I have around 2 minutes left on the clock and an entire RC remaining. I'm not asking you to do that RC, it's kind of not possible. But what you need to do now is just go and read the 4 questions of your RC that is left and see if there's a very halwa question left for you. If there's a question which you could, let's say, solve by reading just the first paragraph, or if there's something that the author is asking that refers to something directly stated in the passage, you need to try and pick the question. Even if you're able to do one question, it's a very big win for you because you've comfortably given time to the VA section and probably done it well. And now you're being able to like attack one question in the RC as well. So it's a win-win situation either way. Let's take a step back because I know I'm putting a lot of ideal expectations on a lot of you out there, and this can be very overwhelming. But the entire purpose of me creating this video is to let this information flow towards you guys, because a lot of people don't know that this is actually possible. In my first attempt in CAT, I didn't even know that completing the entire VARC section was possible. Just like we usually do in the DILR section or the quant section, that we selectively choose the questions that we're supposed to do and leave the rest. I thought the same situation would be with the VARC section as well, but only when I came in discussion with a lot of people who scored really high, I got to know that attempting the VARC section entirely is the way to go about it. Attempting higher number of questions not just gives you the possibility of scoring very high, but also gives you the leverage to do a few more questions wrong. So that is almost all that I wanted to say with this video. This video is mostly about a lot of my personal experiences and my personal strategies of how I went about the VARC section. You can try and incorporate a lot of these things into your strategy. If something doesn't feel good for you, no need to do it. If let's say you're a person who does VA pretty well and RCs, if you do RCs towards the end, it's totally okay to keep it that way. But these are just personal experiences and learnings from my 2 years, and choose what you want to include in your preparation. I hope you found something useful. If yes, consider subscribing, and yeah, share it with your fellow buddy who's preparing for CAT 26 and could benefit from this information. So that is all for this one. See you in the next one. Peace.